At the end of this chapter, the chronological pause will end. But here, another angel, like the one in chapter 17, now comes to John with a vision of political Babylon's fall. Just like religious Babylon, so will the political counterpart opposing God be crushed on all levels, and its destruction will be devastating. Now, we're brought into the angel's witness of Babylon's great fall in verses 1 through 3. And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lighted with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. The angel's use of the words after these things suggests that which happens immediately after the fall of religious Babylon, which of course was recorded in chapter 17. And this angel is like the one that went before him. His appearance and description show the importance and power that he has in his pronouncement. He comes from heaven, which shows his direct commission by God himself for the proclamation being made. His power is great. It's illustrated by the fact that even his presence radiates a holy state throughout the earth. His next most notable quality is that his voice is strong and would likely have to be for the judgmental statement that he's going to make. In what he proclaims, there's no timidity, there's no weakness, there's no fear. Now, this comes from the throne, and this angel is supplied sufficiently to announce it very soberly and adequately. The angel mentions twice that Babylon the Great is fallen. Now, the probable reason for this doublet concerns the fall of religious Babylon back in chapter 17. And now the fall of political Babylon is about to take place here in chapter 18. The verbs used here for this fall suggest that her falls in both cases are complete and final. Babylon, that is worldly Babylon, is pictured as a fallen city, desolate and forsaken. It's like a ghost town where life, that is true life, is absent because of its emptiness. There are no walls or barriers to keep out evil from entering her borders. And as a natural result, she becomes a natural holding cell of evil spirits and demons. But what seems unusual here is that the passage mentions Babylon becoming a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Now, the expression pictures a place that's left destitute of real vibrant life. It's left open for scavenger birds to enter and then peer over every corner to look for another carcass to pick away at the bones. Now, this is not only a picture of the lack of life within its borders, it's also suggestive of the amount of death that's going to be left in the wake of God's judgment on a sinful world. Now, verse 3 indicates that the reason for Babylon's fall has to do with the nation's willing association with her. The whole world has come together to drink down her unholy delicacies, to commit spiritual fornication and to make themselves rich by her. However, the result is not what the world expected, because the result is going to be total desolation and emptiness. The divine judgment of God is coming upon a world as a whole, as it's gathered itself within the city walls of political Babylon. The world will have indulged itself with what it has swallowed from Babylon. Still, the revelation here is that they have drunk down a wine of wrath produced from this fornication. It involves both rulers and merchants, but the judgment will be the same and complete. On the heels of this comes a strong warning from God to his people. God calls his people out from among the evil surroundings. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. In verse 4, there is another voice that comes from heaven. This call of separation, no doubt, comes from God himself because the reference is made to my people. So God calls for his people to come out from among the evil surroundings. And as you can see in the verse, there are two reasons for this call of separation. The first is that his people will not become involved in the sin that's going on around them. And second is that his people will not fall under the same condemnation of the wicked. Now, in every period of biblical history, God has called for the separation of his people from sin. But also God desires for his people to escape the coming destruction. Now, I want to consider something on a broader scale, something that is, I believe, a universal truth. When we preach the believer's separation from sinful practices, there are some believers who scotch their feet and claim that we're preaching legalism. Listen, living right and doing right is not legalism. Having convictions that are based on Scripture is not legalism. Preaching legalism is that of telling people that they have to do something extra biblical to be saved. Now, this term legalism is a term too easily thrown around, in my opinion. It's done, sometimes I believe, to cloud the issue at hand. Now, the Bible is clear about the redeemed staying away from the world and worldly influences. Now, with that said, verse 4 of our passage lays out the command and purpose for all believers to be separate, not only during the tribulation period's closing days either. Believers, we are not to be partakers of the sins of the world. If so, the judgment falling on evil, it could possibly affect those who would be involved in the sin. And if nothing else, strong chastisement from God will be justified. Now, this is not where we want to find ourselves. God is not kidding when he speaks about the judgment to come, because in verses 5 through 8, capital Babylon is to be judged for her many sins. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works. In the cup which she hath filled, fill to her double. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give her, for she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death, and mourning, and famine. And she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord who judgeth her. The angel states that the sins of the world have reached heaven. That is, God especially recognizes those sins for his response. The word for have reached means that these sins have actually come together. They have clung one to another in such a way that God now has to deal with the whole. Now, just like at the time of the Tower of Babel, people now have joined together in their sin to the point that God is no longer going to disregard them. These sins begin to encroach on the very purpose and plans of God. And the Lord is not going to allow his plans that have been generated in heaven to be thwarted by man's evil plans that have been originated from the earth. It's time for God to respond, and he will. Now, in verse 6, God's judgment on Babylon will come back in double portions. The voice speaking here is the angel's voice, and the message is directed back to God, who is the one who brings divine retribution. Babylon has rewarded, it says. It's rewarded God. Now, how can that be true? Well, the word for reward means give out. So the beast gave out to God what the beast wanted, and that was, of course, killing God's people. Now is the time for the Lord to give back to the beast double retribution for what it has done to God. For the cup of the beast's wrath that was poured out, now God must give the beast a double cup of his own divine wrath in the form of destruction. This follows the principle that whatsoever one sows, he must also reap. Now, part of that just retribution comes in verse 7, where the pleasures enjoyed by the beast will be turned against her in God's judgment. The beast had glorified herself through evil exaltation, through godless power, and the reaping of worldly extravagance. Much of that came through religious Babylon that's now been destroyed. Yet political Babylon will now face defacement, the stripping away of her control, and complete poverty. What she's going to encounter is, it says there, much torment and sorrow. Well, she boasted within herself three things. One, that she holds the position as ruling queen. Two, that she had no husband, or in this case, a king, to rule beside her, which means she answered to no one else but herself. And three, that she could never face sorrow. But when comparing her boasts to what God is about to do, she'll find that her throne is going to be removed, that her lovers, who are the kings of the earth, and those are the ones that she conspired with, and although they're not her husband, they're going to be killed, and then her emotions are going to quickly change. She'll face torment and sorrow, and verse 7 also shows that all that she's worked for will be gone in one very quick moment. Plagues will come upon her in one day, leading to death, mourning, famine, total destruction. The fact that this judgment comes on her in one day is also reminiscent of other divine judgments on sin. In other words, when it comes, it certainly comes quickly. The reference could be to the entire tribulation period that culminates with this final blow. Regardless, the ultimate fall of Babylon comes decisively and permanently. Anyone facing this judgment will sense the suddenness of it because of the finality of it. The last statement of verse 8 confirms that the Lord God is strong in his judgment of Babylon. This, of course, will come in the form of Jesus Christ at his second coming. As we'll soon see in the last chapters of Revelation, no one's going to be able to stand against Christ. Now, as a political system, Babylon will be judged. But verses 9 and 10 show how this coming judgment affects the kings who were the lovers of the beast. The kings lament Babylon's fall. And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. All those who were involved with and lent the power of their realms to the beast will cry out over the loss of all their evil investment. The scripture says that they've committed fornication with her, which relates to their intimate connection to her through religious Babylon. It was through religious Babylon, now already destroyed, where they become more powerful and where they felt they were able to rule with her. But as previously noted, Babylon has no husband, but they also live deliciously with her. The word for delicious means to be luxurious. It indicates that the kings of the earth, they fared well as long as they were associated with a political beast. However, the tide has changed. Their riches are gone. Their prominence now has been brought low, and now their luxurious state is one of lowliness and destitution. What they see is everything they thought precious is currently burning up right in front of them. And in verse 10, the kings of the earth are separated from Babylon. They were connected to her in an adulterous relationship, but now they have no choice but to witness her demise. They're also afar off because of the fear that they have concerning the torment that's coming. They can't help but consider the agony facing the political system is also going to reach them because they were a part of it. And such a sobering realization of what's coming elicits fear within them. The kings cry out, using a doublet again here, saying, Alas, alas. Now, like the previous doublet used in verse 2, this doublet likely refers to the fall of both religious and political Babylon. The word means a state of intense hardship or distress, of disaster and horror. The kings realize how much a disaster this is, which brings such an ending state of disastrous horror. The judgment of Babylon is complete. It appears that all the prophecies that went forth about Babylon's annihilation are now fulfilled in the destruction that's going to come very swiftly. All that was revived is now brought to death. That great city Babylon, which was so mighty, is brought to its knees in one moment. Again, that will happen by the second coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. But not only will the kings wail at the loss of their realms and power, the merchants associated with Babylon, the beast, will also cry out at their loss. The merchants lament Babylon's fall. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise any more. Their merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones, and of pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet, and all fine wood, and all manner of vessels of ivory, and all manner of vessels of most precious wood, and of brass, and iron, and marble, and cinnamon, and odors, and ointments, and frankincense, and wine, and oil, and fine flour, and wheat, and beasts, and sheep, and horses, and chariots, and slaves, and souls of men. Remember that no one could buy or sell in earlier chapters unless they had the mark of the beast. And this would bring great hardship upon God's people who refused to receive that mark. Yet those who were part of the beast's market economy made themselves rich because of the system. However, everything changes now. The lamenting of the merchants covers a variety of items that are specifically mentioned here. Now, we're not going to define each one, but let's consider these categorically. In verse 12, the loss is going to be associated with various metals such as gold, silver, precious stones, and pearls. But there's also the loss of the wealthy's clothing, such as fine linen, purple, silk, and scarlet. The wealthy will also lose household items to which they've become very accustomed. Such would include the thine wood, which was a very fragrant wood similar to cypress in the making of furniture. It also involved ivory vessels, precious wood vessels, brass, iron, and marble. Verse 13 shows that the wealthy will lose expensive perfumes and spices, such as cinnamon odors, and ointments, and frankincense. They'll also lose the finest of all the foods, including wine, oil, refined flour, and wheat. Now, also added to their loss are the best expressions of wealth and substance, such as beasts, which are probably cattle and sheep. They'll lose their best modes of transportation in horses and chariots. They'll also lose out on the loss of people under their control. And the fruits that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. The merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city, that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught. And every shipmaster and all the company in ships and sailors, and as many as trade by sea, stood afar off, and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like unto this great city? And they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour is she made desolate. As a result of all the merchants have accumulated in luxury, these items previously mentioned are the fruits their souls lusted after and got. But these have now departed from them, and the desolation is so complete that the angel shows that these will never be found by them again. Like the kings before them, the merchants feel the loss and fear of what's coming as they also stand afar off. They fear the torment so much that they weep and wail. They too cry out that doublet, Alas, alas. In verse 17, the merchants also mention the swiftness at which political Babylon is brought to her knees because it happens in 1 hour. All means of trade have been cut off. There's no longer a means of conducting business. All the riches are gone. All means of generating income is gone. All methods of moving goods are gone. How can there be any hope for the future when everything which has been invested in is now gone? No one knows what to do because there's really nothing that they can do. Right before their eyes, all their confidence, security, and dreams burn away. And it's no wonder that they have a sobering sense of helplessness that moves to hopelessness. They, like the kings, are left with one conclusion. Judgment has come quickly, so quickly. But there's an amazing change in perspective, and that's God's call for his people to rejoice over what's happening. Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her. If you'll remember this question in chapter 6 and verse 10, And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? Revelation 18:20 is the answer. It's heaven's response, and it's now. This is the time, and it's time for your rejoicing to begin. Now, there's nothing suggestive here that God's people are to rejoice over the suffering of others. It's the fact that the culmination of all things is about to take place, and God is presently answering the prayers prayed for all things to be made right. Evil is about to be put down permanently, and that is something, of course, that all of God's people can rejoice over. And now we see the utter annihilation of Babylon. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. In this section, we have what we might call a summary of Babylon's fall. It begins with a picture of a mighty angel throwing a millstone into the sea. Then the angel identifies the meaning of the action. It's an illustration that God is throwing Babylon down into the depths to never be seen again. Her judgment is profound and it's final. The picture presented here is based on a similar incident in the book of Jeremiah. Now I want you to listen to this passage and you'll see the importance of what's also happening here in the book of Revelation. So Jeremiah wrote in a book all the evil that should come upon Babylon, even all these words that are written against Babylon. And Jeremiah said to Seraiah, when thou comest to Babylon, and shalt see, and shalt read all these words, then shalt thou say, O Lord, thou hast spoken against this place to cut it off, that none shall remain in it, neither man nor beast, but that it shall be desolate forever. And it shall be, when thou hast made an end of reading this book, that thou shalt bind a stone to it, and cast it into the midst of the Euphrates. And thou shalt say, thus shall Babylon sink, and shall not rise from the evil that I will bring upon her. And they shall be weary. Thus far are the words of Jeremiah. You can see that the symbolism in Revelation is the same as in Jeremiah concerning Babylon. However, the sinking demise of the religious and political Babylon of Revelation is more encompassing, more thorough, and more final. And the voice of harpers and musicians and of pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee, and no craftsman of whatsoever craft he be shall be found any more in thee, and the sound of a millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee. And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. These verses validate what was previously said about Babylon's end. No one will be able to express any level of joy. And for that reason, deathly silent are the harpers and musicians and pipers and trumpeters. Nothing is remaining to rejoice over. And also the noise of commerce has fallen completely silent. There's no sound of the making of crafts or millstones grinding out the grain. Babylon is also desolate of life, for no candles are lit, nor will they ever be lit there again, not ever. There's no more building of families or coming generations, because no marriage vows or celebrations will ever be heard there again. All the signs and sounds of life fall silent, because those men of the earth who lived deliciously for what the system provided them are gone and left destitute themselves. They use their solicitous deceptions to make themselves great, but their greatness has descended now into emptiness. But the ending reason is highlighted in the last verse of the chapter. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. Of all the things done for which judgment must come, this is it. The beast is accountable for the blood of God's prophets, his saints, and all the slain of the earth. The beast includes all its facets: religious Babylon with the false prophet, political Babylon with the Antichrist, the beast, the scarlet woman, and Satan. That which the blood of the martyrs has cried out for is now at hand. That which we've been waiting for within our study of Revelation is now at hand. Babylon is brought down. In our next study, as we begin chapter 19, we'll see the chronology begin with Christ bringing all of this to pass.